Hello and welcome to the Church We Dream of. I'm Kaya Gutierrez, marriage and family therapist and church leader. I'm so excited that you're here. Our conversation today has been months, if not years, in the works, and our guest has just such a wealth of knowledge to share. So let's get started, and I'm going to introduce our wonderful Christine, who's here with us today. Christine has spent over 25 years as a military spouse, traveling the world alongside her husband, Tony, first as an F-16 crew chief and then as an Army chaplain until his retirement in 2023. Together, they've been in ministry for nearly 33 years, leading retreats and serving military families. She's also a foster and adoptive mom who homeschooled her children for 25 years while advocating for her children and women who've experienced abuse and neglect. She's witnessed our system's brokenness from inside the courtroom, which is a big part of her fueled passion for social justice. She has a master's of arts in counseling and psychology from the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology. She's the founder of Stego Play Therapy, which nurtures connections that lead to flourishing in our very own Lacey, Washington. She believes in making difference through storytelling, everyday kindness, and justice-oriented living. Please welcome Christeen Luxem to the show. How does it feel to be here today?
It's exciting. I've been listening and I just feel really honored that you invited me to be part of this conversation. I love the things that you're talking about and processing and just putting out there for people to listen to and think about.
Well, our conversations outside of this inspired me to eventually get here. So it was absolutely necessary that you come on and share, that we hear from the source of some of my inspiration. So today we could talk about so many social justice things. We could talk about so much American church stuff, but I wanted to start with talking about your book that you've written. Christine has written a children's book and it's called Jesus Remembers. Can you tell us a little bit about Jesus Remembers?
Yeah, so it's not published yet. It's a draft and work in progress, but Jesus Remembers is a story of imagining Jesus's childhood based on the historical information that we do have in the Bible, even though there's very little scripture about the childhood of Jesus. When we look at the context and the history, this story is about imagining the possibility that Jesus had developmental trauma because of the circumstances of his collective culture with epigenetic and then also circumstances of his birth and his childhood into adulthood.
Yes. Developmental trauma is something that we've talked about, but can you give your definition of what you mean when you say that?
So when I talk about developmental trauma, I'm thinking of the impact that stress and terror that could be either from actual abuse, it could be from neglect, it could be from being in systems of oppression, and the impact that that has on the development of our brain and our brain structure and our neural pathways, which then in turn impacts our sense of self and our ability to connect with the people and the world around us in a way that feels safe.
So Jesus Remembers is the story of how did Jesus's childhood impact the way he connects with people and process cultural stress, like social oppression, all of those things that we can see from history or happening, but they're not explicitly stated in scripture.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It's
And that because for me, when I think of the ways that Jesus has suffered, then I feel like I have a God who is with me in my suffering. And I really want children and parents of children who are struggling to feel like God understands and not just understands from looking off from a distance, but understands because God has experienced that. And
yeah.
so really can be with them and understand and help bring new ways of being and knowing themselves and the people around them.
Yeah. This is a really big topic. What inspired you to do it as a children's book?
Well, I love children's books. I grew up in a family that was very centered on play and imagination. My mom always read to us. I love reading to my children and my grandchildren. And what I really love about children's books, really good children's books, is that they can really be so enjoyable and meaningful, not just for the child, but also for the parents. And that this is a really big topic, and there's so much out there, and it can be really overwhelming to start looking into it and researching it. But children's books just can feel really comforting and almost cozy and can open up, opportunities for having conversations that otherwise might be challenging to start with a child. Like, how do you start a conversation like that? How do you start talking to a kid about you might have developmental trauma? Or, but story and arts and play just really open up pathways for connecting and talking about those things that are otherwise scary to talk about.
Hmm. Yeah, children's books. I love that you said they're comforting. And they are. There's something about the words in a children's book that just feels warm and cozy, even if it's funny or a big topic. And then I also like that the goal of this story is it connects parents and children, that they can have a conversation. Because, yeah, there's some hard conversations we get to have with kids as parents, as foster parents, as adoptive parents, as adults in care of children for shorter periods of time. How do we have the big conversations? So, what inspired you to write this children's book at all?
Well, I was in a class called Spirit and Trauma, which is about just kind of the intersection of theology and trauma theory. And my focus has always been children. I have not ever seen anything about the childhood of Jesus
Hmm.
that depicts a possibility of developmental challenges that he might have had. And I also just really see this need for the church to be and create a space for children who have struggles to feel safe. And I think that what really came to me when I was thinking about this was Jesus saying, "Let the children come to me." And I was like, the end of the story came to me first.
Oh,
And just that passion that I have, that there's just more and more children that are experiencing trauma, and that I just want people who love Jesus to be able to create a space for those children and their families to feel safe, because it's very isolating to care
mhm.
for children who have experienced trauma or who have neurodiversity.
Yeah,
For parents, it can feel like, where can I go that I'm not going to be stressed out about how my child is behaving?
yeah, yeah. When you say that so many children are experiencing trauma, what is some of the trauma that you hope? What are some of the children you hope read this book? Like, what are their life experiences or situations?
I think I particularly had in mind children or even adults that have experienced being refugees, that have been forced to migrate. I think from the research that I've done that there's a possibility that children who have been in foster care, who have been forced to be removed from their family that they know for safety reasons, I
Hmm.
think that there's a similar experience that they have. And I have heard it called annihilation anxiety. And it's this very real feeling that not only you, but the world itself will be annihilated. Everything will be gone and completely destroyed. And so those are the families that families that have had to been forced to migrate or forced to leave their homes. Could be families from other countries. It could be families from America. Those are
Yeah,
the children. Neglect, abuse, pre-verbal trauma really gets stuck in our nervous system. So I think those children being able to read and understand that even my story starts before Jesus is even born, and that even babies in the womb feel danger coming from the world outside if that's what their mom is experiencing. And then when they're born, that's what their nervous system knows. And without working through it and talking about it, then it stays.
Yeah. Yeah. That just made me think of a personal story. It makes me think about we were foster parents for a little while. And during that time, I was pregnant with our second child. And just you saying that is reminding me because something that I've been wrestling with as a parent is she has this fear that I'm going to leave all the time. And I'm like, "Ugh, I've never left, never left." And so I was been asking, where's that coming from? And what came to my mind is we were foster parents at the time, and I was always afraid that I was going to lose my baby, not the one
Mm,
inside of me, but the one I was
right.
caring for. And I remember thinking while I was pregnant, I wonder how much of this is going into my baby's brain, how much of this stress is being transferred to her. So I just saw this picture real quick of like, I was afraid I was going to lose my baby. And now she's afraid she's going to lose me. I did. Those babies went on to their parents, which is what they wanted. The Lord provided. But my experience of stress
Hmm.
is still showing up in her nervous system. And as parents, we get frustrated, like, I've never left you. And so just having the lens at all of thinking about what was I experiencing while I was pregnant, not that we need to be worried about more, but now that we're on the other side, how can we nurture that part of them that's here today in the reality of the situation that they were born into?
Right. And one of the things that is also in the book is that Jesus and his lineage and the generations and his culture, they had so much systemic trauma.
Mm-hmm.
They also had rhythms and ways of remembering that together.
Mm.
And that when you look at neuroscience and you look at indigenous practices, that rhythm of remembering and which would be done with the whole community, and they would talk about the hard things that happened. They would use music, they would use food. Those are all ways of integrating our experience, and it also relieves children or even adults, but since I'm talking about a children's book, it relieves them from feeling like they have to carry that memory alone or pretend that that memory doesn't exist, like it didn't happen. Because if adults won't talk about it, then the children aren't going to bring it up.
Yeah.
And so I'm so curious about how those rhythms would have sustained and created resilience in a community that experienced so much trauma and so much oppression that we would regularly talk together about the hard things that happened and the ways that they were brought through it,
Mm.
and looking forward to what was also still to come and integrating all of those things. And so a lot of times in trauma and in even considering annihilation anxiety, what we talk about is that the thing that we're so afraid of it's already occurred.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way that we just hold things without processing and integrating, we haven't fully experienced it to the point that we can have some closure and not have to keep reliving it.
Yeah. Yeah. Since we're talking about this, what do you mean when you say re-experience it? Like if you're holding it and you're not experiencing it, does experiencing it mean like reliving the whole thing? Like what does that look like? Especially for children, since that's your specialization, what does that look like?
Yeah. I think it can look different in different scenarios. I think experiencing it has to do with being able to feel the feelings in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, that there's someone safe there to contain that and hold that with you, and that there's language that can be put to it so that then it is integrated in all the spheres of the brain and not just stuck in either the language part of the brain that so quickly will say, "Oh, I know what this is," and then react, which is also what happens that you've talked about before then that survival mechanism gets triggered. And so being able to work through it into, and now I am safe. Now I am in a safe place. Then that's kind of how I think about that.
So this children's book, Jesus Remembers, is a tool that parents can use to, one, bring up these conversations with their kids. Two, it labels and gives language to it. It provides some mirroring opportunities where you get to see Jesus experiencing the same thing this child or the adult experienced. And it's also contained, so the emotion isn't going to be overwhelmed. You close the book and the story's over. We can keep reading it or we can close it and put it away, which is just so wonderful. So what does Jesus experience in the book? What does little Jesus experience?
Well, so he starts out being, well, let me back up a little bit. So when you look at the lineage of Jesus, there are, I think it's 5 women named in his lineage, and they all have experienced significant trauma. And it's striking to me that that is the lineage that God would choose to reveal himself and come through. So I think from the beginning, there's epigenetic trauma. Then the time that he's growing in Mary, she's experiencing ridicule from the religious people, fear from the oppressive government that really could do anything they want at any time. And then they're forced to migrate. So she goes to a place that's not her home to deliver her first baby by herself in a cave. And probably about 2 years later, they have to leave because the Pharaoh has ordered the killing of all the babies. And so they are really, truly in fear for their lives. And they flee in the middle of the night to go back to the land that their ancestors were slaves in and experienced horrible trauma in, and also experienced an edict for all the babies to be killed. And so there's all of the history of it. And then there's also just the present trauma of this is a totally new place. He's, around 2 or 3 years old. The people are different. The smells are different. The food is different. Everything is different. And it's supposed to be safe. And it is safe at that time, because at that time, actually, Egypt was a place that a lot of immigrants came from all over. That type of a diverse culture was safe in Egypt at that time. But I don't know that means that it felt safe.
Right.
And felt safety is really important. So then from there, they go to Galilee. And Galilee was also a place that had diversity, but people were despised for the diversity in Galilee. And then I just talk about, some of the things that Jesus might have carried as a child, seeing his parents worry, having to leave in the middle of the night. And then it goes forward to when he was older as an adult, and the children come and the disciples are trying to keep them away. And Jesus says, no, I remember what it's like to be a child. And in my story, he encourages us to remember our own pain and our own trauma in order to make us able to love and accept the people who are still experiencing that.
I love the ending that you're reframing that whole moment with Jesus and the children, that he's not calling them because they're cute or cuddly or they're fun to be around. He's calling them because he has walked in their shoes too. We talk about how Jesus knows our suffering. We don't always frame that in kids. Like, Jesus knows the suffering of our children, and he lived the suffering of our children as a child, in a child's body, like all the scary things. He lived it, not in an adult body, which is different than living it in a kid body. He had to live the power dynamic of being a child and a refugee instead of being an adult in that situation. It's a different dynamic, which is just powerful for us to think about as individuals. What about our childhoods? Are we assuming that God doesn't understand because he's a man? Right? Jesus is a man. What are we assuming that he can't fathom? And here you're giving us the opportunity to use our curiosity to explore. What if he could understand that? Here's some data that suggests maybe he could, which is amazing. How did you feel sitting with all of that, writing all that content, like getting into his shoes and seeing what he might experience?
It was a little overwhelming emotionally when it first came to me. I was pretty overwhelmed emotionally. And then it feels exciting. And I just think there's so much potential when we look at the life of Jesus this way, not only to understand children, but also to understand our own connection with God and what we bring into how we relate to God. And to, like you said, realize, oh, God actually embodied the life of children also. So, developmental trauma causes attachment issues. And Gabor Mate says children will always choose attachment over authenticity. And I think when we open that up and consider that in the light of God embodying a child, we can think about that we don't have to sacrifice authenticity to have attachment with God. God has lived traumatic events in the body of a child. And we can bring that.
So we don't have to sacrifice our authenticity for attachment. But what children with developmental trauma will do will sacrifice their authenticity for attachment with that adult.
Yes. And then I think as adults that oftentimes, especially in our society, haven't worked through our own developmental trauma, because we all have some sort of developmental trauma. Some, of course, it's much bigger than others. But then we bring that attachment style into our relationship with God. And we sacrifice, even as adults, our authenticity in order to maintain attachment with God. And I think that God does not ask us to do that.
I don't know if we've talked very much about attachment styles yet, but that seems like a rabbit hole that we should go further down another time, is that we project our attachment style onto God. And that's not something that he's asking for. So if you know about attachment styles, just run through that thought for yourself. If not, hopefully we'll circle back to that. I want to be sure that the listeners know about the art in this book, because even how it was created is a beautiful process that I think they'd like to know about. So tell us about the art of this book.
Okay, so the art is collaborative work that I have been really privileged to do with my son. That makes it kind of emotional. His name is Joshua, and he is a tattoo artist. He's an incredible artist. He has worked very hard to be where he's at and do what he's doing. And I just asked if he might be interested in doing this, and he wanted to. So it's been great. And I think it's provided some opportunity for healing for him. And I really like just the way that the line work of it's I don't know, sort of a different style of art. It's not like tattoo flash, but there's the line art that is reminiscent to me of the flash that my son draws. But I feel like the line art is really grounding, and then the colors just add. Some of it evokes a lot of emotion, but there's also some soothing in it. So yeah, and he enjoyed working on it, and we're still working on it. The illustrating is a much bigger process than I realized. But one of the things that he said to me when he was working on it is that he had never thought of that Jesus might be sad or worried about his parents when he saw them worried, or, he felt really sad himself drawing the pictures and realizing, wow, he had to leave in the middle of the night for his safety. And so that's been a really beautiful part of it.
Yeah. And it's easy to push back on that thought and be like, no, Jesus wasn't sad. He wasn't scared, but he embodied human flesh. And in that age, when you're forming attachments, you would experience fear if your attachment appeared unstable. It's just a part of life. And I think it's sort of a gift. You said everybody has a little bit of developmental trauma. Of course we do, because all of our parents are imperfect, right? Jesus would have experienced sadness and fear, and that's not a bad thing. It would have been part of his gift to us that he allowed himself to experience those things. And also, he created the human body and felt that that was good. He created that and said it's good. So there's something about the whole redemption story that we get to wrestle with, the fact that he engaged with those things as a child. And it's okay that he did. And it's okay that we do. It's okay that we go back to our childhood and honor the emotions of our childhood. Even if we can look back on it now and say everything worked out, because we can look back on Jesus' story. Everything worked out, But in the moment, it was still real. And that matters. He went through a process.
When we think about caring for children that have developmental trauma, we need to also keep in mind our own woundedness, that we can have a lot of knowledge about, oh, this has happened in the brain structure, or we could know that high cortisol levels can make a child, be emotionally dysregulated. We can know those things, but until we have an actual new experience with our child, which might be sitting down and reading a book together, it might be playing together, that we also come to our children with our own neural pathways. And that having safe, playful experiences with our children don't just create neural pathways and impact our children's brain structure, it impacts our brain structure as well. And that sometimes, especially now when there's so much, we're flooded with ideas and words to use and ways to be with our children. And it can feel like, why isn't this working? This is so frustrating. And it's really that there's neuroplasticity in us and in our children, and that we have to have repeated experiences before those pathways become like the regular firing pathways of our brains. And I think just that we have to have new experiences, and we need to be patient with not just with our children, but with ourselves too.
Yeah. I think I'm remembering reading the draft that you showed me in your living room, and just like the calm that settled over me as I'm just taking in the words and enjoying the colors and the content. And I remember some of the images were big, and I let my eye wander across the page, and some of them were kind of broken into pieces. And so I could look at just one at a time. And just the calm it brought over me as an adult reading it, and the idea of being able to read that to a child and knowing that we're both getting that regulation from the book. Like, as a parent, I want to have this conversation with my kid, but I don't know how. Maybe I have my own stuff, but I haven't processed that's in the book. And as we're reading this, it gives us such a safe space to come back to, because you're saying we need repeat conversations. And so maybe this becomes a book that kids and parents read more than one time, and they allow it to do its work. It's slow healing work. Like, maybe one page lands one day and another page lands another day. It's not as overwhelming as like a big textbook or how-to manual. It's just a cozy children's book. But it does some heavy lifting. I remember in that day, I was like, this needs to be like a sermon. This needs to be like a study or a training. That's how rich the content is. But it is so beautifully presented as a safe children's book. And so I'm sure lots of people are excited to read it. You said it's not published. Do you have any ideas when or how it might be published, so if people did want to read it?
Not yet. We're still working on the illustrations. So once the illustrations are done, and I'll probably do a final edit on the words, and I want to add some more current resources for parents and caregivers at the end of it. So I've never published a book before. I don't even know what the process is, but I feel like it's very timely, and I am feeling prompted that it's time to do it.
Well, I hope this conversation inspired you, reminded you why you started this, and gives you the gumption to finish it. I'm sure we'll be back and have more conversations. Is there anything you want to say to the listeners as we wrap up? Anything that comes to your heart, like, I just want to be sure to say this real quick if you're listening?
Oh gosh. I think just maybe that there's a lot of pain in the world. And I think it's important that we be gentle with ourselves and know that God is not afraid of our pain. And God is gentle with us too.
Yeah. God is gentle with us too, in the same way He's gentle with children. I think we can all sit with that for a minute. I'm going to sit with that for a minute and remind myself again. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to your book being published. I'm sure everyone agrees. Thank you for sharing your heart with us. And we will do another episode sometime soon.
Yeah.